Another ad, you say?
Another ad it is.
This one is a special ad to remind all those listening, or may just be starting to listen, that we are traveling to Barcelona 2026 to complete the Barcelona Marathon. This is your sign to sign up for Barcelona Marathon in March of next year. You can visit www.anygivenrunday.com, go to our marathon trip page, and you can look at the trip, book the trip, and get involved with us as we travel. Next year's places are limited. We have increased places, but they will sell out quick. So please ensure to get booked on, and we will see you in Barcelona. Let's get back to the episode.
PB's not included.
Easy E, how are we?
Shawnee, I'm very uncomfortable. Not because I'm sitting on a gym ball as we record this. I'm not used to being in the same room as you when we record these things.
I was hoping you said a gym ball line because I was going to say the exact same thing about being uncomfortable sitting right beside you. But I'm on like location for this one. I've travelled all the way from Kildare to County Meath to record this episode of the podcast.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I've covered no distance for today's episode, which is brilliant. But yeah, no, I'm feeling good. I'm a little bit tired.
You're a little bit tired, are you?
I am. I didn't sleep too well last night.
Is that all the nervous energy you had leading up to the Dunshaughlin 10K that we just did last night? Is that what that's all about?
We laughed about it, but I actually don't think you've ever seen me that nervous for anything.
I was, so we got out of the car in Dunshaughlin. Eric's like, yeah, I know where we're going. All the rest hadn't a clue where he was going, parking around the place. And
I must have been parking.
Yeah, but you didn't know where the start line was.
No, I didn't know.
We must have been walking, I'd say 30 seconds max, and some lad comes running past you. Go on, Team Fisher! I had to yank Eric back from saying something silly to him. I'm like, you're wearing the Any Given Run Day t-shirt, Eric. Don't be slagging people. Put the Jimmy Carr impression to bed, sir.
Yeah, I have a very quick mouth, and anyway, I reined it in. So it was my first experience of being, because usually you go to races and people are like, oh, Shawnee, you know. I literally got out of the car and some Team Fisher, you know, if he had an egg, he would have thrown it at me. I was very nervous. I was very nervous all day. It was an evening race, which was really nice. But then I was also kind of just nervous all day. I was sweaty palms. I was everything. I was like, oh no, I haven't been that nervous for a marathon.
It was mad. It was such a study in contrast because I genuinely hadn't, it wasn't a race with me. I hadn't ran 10K in like 3 months. So I wasn't even thinking about it all day. And then seeing you and going for like 3 year time. And in my mind, I was like, sure, he's been in Dubai. I know he's done treadmill work. I know you're unsure of the time, but you've done track sessions in the heat and stuff like that. I'm like, he's got to be grand. But then when I seen the starting line, and we saw go people like Jamie and Helen come over and from the Barcelona trip and Teresa and Rob and Owen, everyone else, and was like, they're all talking to you. I'm like, oh, actually, no, he's nervous the way he's acting here. He's actually nervous for his time. He's not too sure what he's doing. Should he go the 50 line, the 45-minute marker? What's he doing before the race? And it was just interesting to watch it. And I was like, this is going to be great material for the podcast.
Yeah, the best bit was Emmett was like, oh, just stick at your 5-minute kilometers. And I seen him as I was walking to the start line. I was like, I'm going out at 4:30, Emmett. Just stay at the finish line. And he was like, oh, no. We'll see how that goes for you.
I had no intention of going anywhere near that. And then right at the start, Helen's like, oh, so you're able for a 45-minute, Sean. And I was like, maybe I am able for a 45-minute. I'll stick around here with you guys. Because I was just going to cruise a 50, 55-minute and just be happy I was running again. I was like, nah, feck it, I'll go for it. So we just took off, all of us at a 4:25 pace.
Yeah, the first K was a 4:25, and I very quickly realized that wasn't going to last. I was even running beside you, but the worst part was, you know, you've been a bad athlete for 2 years when your family are all like, go on, Sean. And they miss me because they didn't expect to see me beside I was within 2 meters of you at that stage, so which surprised everyone. It was very different, and the reason I was so nervous because it was unknown. I have a lot more confidence now of what I could do, and I just didn't know. I think I was probably the only person yesterday that didn't complain about the heat.
Yeah, the heat got a lot of people. I have to say, just in case we don't mention it later, the support from everyone coming out of their houses and stuff, like there was around 5 or 6 people with hoses throughout the race and stuff, and the only one avoiding them was you over the other side.
Someone got me with their hose, the first hose, and it was fucking freezing. So I was like, oh no, I'm not doing that again. That was horrible.
There was a stage after the 2-3K where you would pass me out, and I just saw you went by like, oh, you've something important to talk about the podcast now, or something along that you said. And I was like, all right, keep pushing ahead. I knew after 2K, I was like, oh, I've done a fair bit of running now. I'm going to pull right back and I'm just hanging on for dear life here. I was an idiot. But anyway, I could just see when we're going to a right turn, everyone was in on the left because that's where the shade was, and you just took the straight line through the sun. You're like, grand, and you were passing everyone out in the corners.
I didn't change pace, but passed so many people out by
Yes.
running a straight line, and it was great because I live in Ratoath. I did deliveries for a takeaways around here. I knew every bend on
Mm.
this route, but I've never ran the route. But I was like, I know the road, and people were like keeping left, and I was like, this is like a 90-degree right hand turn. I was like, just I ran. I think my watch said 10.05, which was pretty close.
Mm.
So I was like, I ran pretty as straight as I could, and I passed a lot. A lot of people worked very hard just to cover the same. There's not like massive, but you could notice the difference. I'd get up on them and then they'd have to pass me out again.
I think I was 10.16, 10 point or something like that, 10.26 maybe on it. So that just shows over 100 meters over something that was fairly straight and stuff, the big difference between the two of us. When you got up the hills, you just seemed I lost you the 6K. We just seemed very controlled going up there. I was like, okay, he's back on track. But then I was thinking, oh, is does he settle in now because he's passed a few of us out, or is he going for a fast time? Is that going to get to his head, or what was your thoughts through that? Because this for you was, in fairness, and because you've talked about it a lot in the podcast, it had to be like a. I know you're coming back into racing, but like an A race, just to see this is where you're at. You are building towards something because Barcelona was just you knew where you're at, just get through Barcelona Marathon. Whereas for me, Barcelona, this is the PB, this is the big race I built towards. Yesterday, it was the complete opposite. This was where it was a statement for you.
Yeah, it was really weird. And I haven't passed you out in probably 3 years.
Mm.
And that was really off-putting actually, because you went off in the distance and I was stuck at my pace and I was settling in and I was like, well, that's the end of that. Like I'll see Sean at the finish. There he goes to his 45. And but then gradually, I don't think you changed your pace. I think I naturally just settled in. I probably slowed down too much in the second kilometer, but then settled in at a nice pace that I found comfortable.
Yeah.
But then I passed you, and then Helen got over. It was just back from holidays. Was I passed her, but that was like really unsettling because I was like, I shouldn't be seeing
Yeah.
Helen. I was like, what have I done? I've done something wrong here. I'm definitely gonna blow up. And I had this little moment of, what have I done? But then I was just like, just you know where the 6K is. Let's just get to the turn and then see how we are. And then I knew there was a couple of hills on the back roads, and I have to say there was some great people on the course.
Mm.
I asked everyone their names, but I ended up talking to 30 people. So if I start listing the names of people, I'll forget someone, I'll offend someone. But so many people chatted to me on the run, telling us, love the podcast, doing great. And I was just like trying to talk to them because I'm not used to that experience. It's
Yeah.
usually you. And without going, please stop talking to me because I don't know if I'm gonna blow up. There's a young girl. I'm gonna get. I think it's Ava or something. She ran with me. The girl in blue. If you're listening, from 6K, we were
Yeah.
forward, back. Ultimately, I couldn't. I had to cross the line at the same time, but she ended up pulling away like a couple of 100 meters in front of me, and I just for my last K. I just took that because we'd been back and forth for nearly 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers at that stage. So a big thank you to you for getting me through to the end of the race. Even like I was surprised when I came up to the top of it was a great course.
Yeah. Well, it's
Really
very good.
was.
Yeah.
And then a couple of little drags as well. And when I got to the top of that at 8K, I knew it's pretty much flat-ish downhill from here. Emmett was surprised to see me go past. He was like, Eric, well under 50 minutes now. So yeah, it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it, the atmosphere. And I have to say, for a 10K,
That
the
finish.
finish line
Oh
was
my God.
amazing.
Yeah, really
The
good.
amount of people cheering and screaming, and I absolutely loved it. I have to say, it was a great race, great experience, great support, well organized as always. Some guests of the podcast were there. Sean Noble was there, ran a 32, 30 something. It was
We
absolutely phenomenal.
didn't mention this last week because we recorded the intro very early last week, but he actually went out to World Championships in Chicago and was age group world champion there. So like he was talking to us before the race how like he was training for that. Having done that, and he did he was in the Irish relay team with Aoife Faye, who was in the podcast as well. So he ran a couple of races in Chicago, came back to Ireland, and then did a 32-minute 10K.
It's absolutely
Absolutely phenomenal,
phenomenal.
Sean
And then
Noble.
our own gang, a big shout out to our own gang who you've mentioned as well, who were with us at the Barcelona Marathon, came out in force. Pat actually won, I think he won an age group race,
I think so,
10
yeah.
minutes or something. An
Oh,
absolute phenomenal run from Pat. It was a really, really good day, and I suppose the purpose of the day was to race Lorcan Fisher.
And
He didn't show up. He knew Emmett was training me. He knew I was
got
in top
scared.
form. He got
You
scared.
got
And I
scared.
bailed. So whoever came and said Team Fisher to me, now, last joke is on me because he didn't even show up that day. You backed the wrong horse. But no, Lorcan was on the emergency aeromedical service and had to cover a duty and unfortunately couldn't make the race day. So I set the gauntlet down for the time trial. He is currently, as we record, running. I actually might even
Oh,
have a message.
while you're doing that, I'm going to send out an apology to people that saw me at the end of the race because I was not thinking about the race all day. I was more thinking about how you got on, you training Fisher and all the rest. So I was working that morning and had my usual morning routine of a big, massive bowl of granola and stuff like that. And I had two of those. Neve's gone. I'm blaming Neve. Shouldn't listen to the
You're
podcast.
dead.
Neve's gone away. She's gone in the head in Budapest. So I had to look after myself for dinner. And I got one of those, two of those like fit food packet things. And it's like, oh, extra
too.
carbs. So there I was getting
Yeah.
loads of noodles and chicken and then loads of rice and chicken. And then you're feeding me bananas. Your man was feeding me jellies. Oh, I got the 8K and the stomach was like, whoa. And I forgot how bad I do in evening races. Now, let me just clarify something before this sounds like anything else. Eric was well and truly ahead of me at this stage. I'm not making excuses or anything like that. I was just hanging on for dear life. I couldn't go any fast. I was like a 5:10, 5:15 pace. And got near the end. I saw Pat. Pat had well finished and come halfway back up, cheering people on. He's like, go on, you'll make sub 50. And I was like, I'm not thinking about sub 50.
I'm just trying not to shit myself.
I'm talking to finish. I was like, Eric, how'd you get on? By the way, where's the nearest garage? Where's something? I went into a cafe. It was like, can I use your toilet, please? And they're like, out of service. I'm like, oh.
No.
And then I found a bar and then just straight in. Thankfully, I was in there and I was like, oh, watch, acclimatized by 22%.
But yeah, it was. But it was good for me. It was nice to have a race in a temperature that could let me assess where I am because I go back to the treadmills and everything else now for the next 6 months. It was really, really enjoyable. Very nice race. Well organized, and a big mention as well to the recovery rooms in Ratotu who got in touch with us to say anyone who has listened to the podcast and has done the Dunshaughlin 10K, they're doing a bring a buddy deal. So for €30 you can go use their plunge pools, their saunas. They have the recovery boots, you know them boots?
Oh, yeah.
And jacuzzis, and I think it's an hour. So anyone who is in the vicinity of Ratoath, you are more than welcome to use, as long as you mention the podcast or the Dunshaughlin 10K. You can go and use the facilities there. The lovely Jess will look after you in there, and it's a phenomenal place. I actually went to the salt rooms.
Oh,
Yeah, with my mum. So that's probably why I beat you.
I was speaking of your mother.
It's doping. I was breathing in salt for an hour. It's an absolutely fabulous place, and then they've opened the recovery rooms inside. So if anyone is, and particularly when it comes to Dublin Marathon training, if you are looking for something every so often at the end of every 4 week block to just go in and recover, I would highly, highly recommend it.
I better finish that sentence. Speaking of my mother, I have a bone to pick with her if she listens to the podcast. I won't say in front of her. 'Cause
She
I'm afraid.
called out Fisher in a voice note that
She
night.
did actually. Yeah, Fisher didn't know what to say. That was the heaviest race I've ever been at. I was around 88 or so kilo. You're back down around 88 kilo, and yet the photo your mother took, you look like a giant. You look lean. You look 10 kilo more muscle mass than me, and I look tiny beside you. I was very upset with that photo. I'm very upset seeing that. I don't even angle me or what the story was, but you look huge. You look great. I made you look good. I'm very
Is there
disappointed.
anything else you want to talk about, little man?
No.
But
Actually, I
you know,
do.
I haven't changed. And everyone's like, Jesus, you're some size. I'm like, I'm been the same size for you.
Big fat, aren't you?
Yeah,
What's
but
the plan now?
the plan now is Barcelona Marathon is my next A race.
Okay.
I've a half marathon in Perth in 2 weeks. So I'm going to see
Wow,
what's
okay.
in the tank there, and that'll give me a half marathon on the continent of Australia. So yeah, that's my next plan, just to see how I am for a half. I probably don't have the long runs in me to do well in that. The 10K was the priority. The half is just to do a half. I had the choice to
You
do 10.
said that with 10, you weren't ready for it yet, though.
No,
You
but
did
I had
all
the
right.
choice to do a 5, a 10, a half, or a marathon.
Hmm.
Guess what I wanted to do?
The half.
No, the marathon. And I've been told I'm doing the half.
Okay, right, you
So,
know, choice in
because
that
then
one.
it would have been a marathon ticked off
Yeah,
in Australia.
Nisha would look good to finish the marathon line on that
Yeah,
one.
but then I probably would have suffered. It is what it is. So we'll do a half marathon, and then from there, if I was in Ireland, obviously we'd be building to Dublin, which we will be covering as a podcast, building to Dublin. But for me, my next big race will be Barcelona, and what the goal is there, we don't know yet. I'm not going to say it out loud because I said 42 minutes for this 10K.
Oh, you were reminded of that.
I
You
know.
were reminded
I
of that.
know. I got spanked.
Yeah.
I got absolutely spanked.
You were so nervous though, like, oh Eric, what happened? I thought you were doing 42, Jamie was saying to you.
If I went over 50 minutes, we'd have to stop the podcast. We would. So it's but look, to get a little bit quicker for the next little while is the initial goal. It's the only thing that seems to work with the environment I'm in at the minute. So focusing on the interval sessions, focusing on building, well, I have a great tolerance for the heat and stuff now, but it's the only, I can't run for 2 3 hours out there. It's just too much. So yeah, just focus on the speed work for now, and then as it starts to cool down out there again, we'll start to look at building for Barcelona and really giving this a good go. Hopefully beat you in Barcelona. That'll be my goal.
Feeling the pressure
Yeah.
already. I'm
Yeah.
feeling the pressure now. You're
If
getting
I
your mojo back after last night.
If I can do that, I can do it. But look, I started this for those who follow and people who say, actually, someone commented on Facebook, you're talking about the Dunshaughlin 10K like it's the like it's the
Boston.
Boston Marathon. Yeah,
Yeah, it was for you.
because and do you know what? Running is everyone has their World Cup final, and that Dunshaughlin 10K was something I really set my sights on. And if someone is looking to do a couch to 5K, if someone is looking to do the women's mini marathon, if someone's taking on a park run trying to break 30 minutes, that is their big race. And running is exactly that. Treat every race like it's the Boston Marathon. Treat every race like it's the Dublin Marathon. You know, it's I'm glad someone said you're treating it like that, because then we did the 10K justice.
Yeah.
We did the race justice, even though the other person didn't show up. And that was a good guess. So for me, it's not my fastest 10K, but I started the journey at 99 kilos. I'm now 90 kilos. I did a good run. We're making progress, and it's a nice foundation level. It's nothing that to do a podcast episode about, but
And yet,
yeah, here we are. But it's progress, and I hope others listening who may not be where they are or may be well off where they were maybe a year or two ago will use me as a kind of guide that, look, yeah, it took a while, but progress is happening and we're getting back there. And I think having these little goals and the support of Emmett Dunleavy, and I've mentioned him a couple of times on his program for the last little while, kept me honest.
yeah.
But it's very difficult for him to have a measure because I'm not here. It's a treadmill. It's this. So neither of us knew what was going to happen on the day. So it's So for anyone who is listening, pick a race, make it a World Cup final. You know, put that pressure on yourself. Be as nervous as I was on the start line, because that's how it was to me. Like I was racing, even though he wasn't there, I was racing him.
Yeah.
You know, and I put that pressure on myself for a reason. So very happy with it, and overall, what a fantastic event.
Yeah, it was really, really enjoyable, and the weather definitely made it. And probably for some people, because the heat, their times and stuff, or probably don't think they were there for that one, just kind of trying to pace and that sort of heat. But sure, you're well acclimatized. You're at advantage, son, and you.
I actually was.
Yeah, you were
It
grand. You actually almost said you got cold at one stage because the rain.
When they sprayed me with the hose, it was freezing. So the next 3 hoses I ran, that was the one time I took off my line. That probably added on the 0.5.
You
I
didn't
ran
even
to the other
stop.
side of the road.
You didn't even stop for water.
No, didn't take on water.
Every state except the last couple, because I was struggling. I couldn't take anything more on board. I was water.
Honest to God, was very, very comfortable. I was working hard, but I wasn't sweating as much as I would normally, which because people were coming up at the end like, okay, I'd back, my hair was wet, you know. But when you look at my sleeves and all, I wasn't like, people were saturated.
Yeah.
I was
Tough race for a lot of people in that respect, but you couldn't ask any more from support, from the amount of water stations that people coming out of the houses clearly doing, and the hoses and all the
and
rest.
the road closures, everything. It was a great
Yeah.
race. No, really, really well organized. Plenty of parking
Yeah, no issues.
and great environment in the pubs afterwards. Not that we'd know anything about that.
No, God, no. Better move on.
But yeah, it's a long intro. We didn't do a separate episode for the 10K review of Dunshaughlin. And do you know what? It probably deserved it, but it was a phenomenal race, really well organized, and a big shout out to all those pop-up races as well, who we met at the start line, not wearing the appropriate t-shirts for us now, but it's Anto, if you're listening, we'll sort that. But yeah, no, well done to everyone who took part. Well done to everyone who achieved the PB on that day. And well done to everyone who didn't, but survived a difficult evening race on a hot day. Oh, it was really, really, really enjoyable and happy to now to move on. It's like other athletes. I'm just, what's next? What's next?
Well, what's next for you further down the line is
Barbecue
what
now in about 2 hours.
what's next for you further down the line. You've hinted at our next guest is, as we record this podcast, is currently doing an Ironman in the Netherlands. We recorded, we obviously didn't record this podcast very soon, close to that one, recorded a few weeks ago. But yes, just a very interesting podcast on Ironman, getting into, just dabbling into ultra marathons and someone that's very big on nutrition and has documented their journey last year online towards Dublin Marathon. So getting more of the nutrition side of things, doing the Dublin Marathon, easing into Ironmans, that kind of thing. So I'm very excited for this guest coming up.
Yeah, it's a great episode and a long one. So again, I'm sorry we covered so much in this. We'd a lot to catch up on, but this episode really deserves your time, attention, with a great individual. Really get great outlook on food and nutrition. You'll probably recognize him, but it's do you know what? One of those that we learned a hell of a lot. And it's great. We say it all the time, front row seats to fantastic people doing fantastic things. And this one is no different.
And with that said, it's this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. Let's go. Our next guest on the Any Given Run Day podcast is a cook, nutritionist, athlete, and entrepreneur, founding the meal prep company Country Munch, and is a TV chef with Virgin Media on the 6 o'clock show. After vlogging his training for the Dublin Marathon last year, he recently completed his first ultra marathon in Wicklow and now has his sights set on his first Ironman in the Netherlands this month. Eoin Sheehan, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. How are you getting on?
Good, boys. Good. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I have so many more questions. Like, that intro is on a scale that I'm not used to.
You've jazzed me up an awful lot there now. You've jazzed me up an awful lot.
Let's just get back to it so I can work on some of these questions. This was your first marathon, but in terms of sport, how did you get into sport? Was running always part of your childhood, or what was it for you when you were growing up?
No, I was never a runner, but I actually was always involved in sport prior to food. Health and fitness was my first passion, and food was kind of a byproduct of that. And we can get into that in a while. But as a pre-teen and teenager, rugby was my main sport. Rugby was what I wanted to do with my life. When from the age of 12 to 20. Maybe 19, my whole life was rugby and was progressing, I suppose, along the right trajectory to, I suppose, make some bit of a go at having a career in rugby. I'm from West Limerick, up in the countryside, but I was playing rugby in the city, which is kind of the first step when you're not in the bubble. You kind of have to go and get into the bubble. So, from a young age, thankfully, my parents took me out of the countryside, put me into a team in the city, and we were competitive, and I went through all those rankings. So sport was a huge part. Even prior to that, I swam, I was playing rugby, I was playing GA, I was playing soccer. I was one of the kids that had a full itinerary schedule Monday to Friday and then matched on the weekends. So all credit goes to my parents for taxiing me to different pitches and different sports leisure centers and whatnot when I was, from 6 to 12. But yeah, I suppose always a big part of my life. What that fitness has changed over the last few years. Just, I suppose, like everything else, as you mature and as you go through sport, you tend to find different avenues and ones that suit your schedule now, or ones that suit your ability. And running, I found really late. Running, I really didn't get into running, and to be honest with you, I hated running. When I played rugby, I despised running. I was a prop forward. Running was the opposite thing I should have been doing. And, I told myself I wasn't a good runner for years. I just had it banked off and blocked off. I was like, no, that's not my sport. And it was only a couple of years ago I got into it via my girlfriend was doing a half marathon. I was like, sure, look, I'll do it with you. And we trained for it, and I just got the bug, and I've been running ever since.
Need fuel that keeps up with your pace? Meet Performs Carb Gel with 30 grams of fast-acting carbs, powered by 3 fuel sources for sustained energy when it matters the most. Packed with cluster dextrin for smooth digestion and a steady release. No spikes, no crashes.
All that in a compact 40 milliliter sachet tested under Informed Sport so you know it's clean and competition ready. Whether you're chasing the podium or just in an XPR, Perform Carb Gel gets you there faster, longer, stronger. If you're looking to stock up, you can use the code AGR to get 20% off your order.
By listening to this advert, you are supporting Irish businesses and this Irish podcast. Time to get back to the episode. A lot of athletes we get on this show, and I call them, they never call themselves athletes, but when you grow up in that kind of disciplined lifestyle, you are an athlete. You were hoping to be in the professional. They say they have an identity. How difficult was it when you realize, because I've done it, I was always going to be a professional soccer player. That was it. That was in the making. How difficult was it for you to transition away, or at what point did you go, do you know what? I don't think I'm going to make this, and I need to have a look at who I am. How was that transition, and at what point did that happen for you?
Yeah, it's a funny one, because the reason it didn't work out, and like, of course, there's no excuses in this. First and foremost, there's no guarantee I would have made it anyway, regardless. But when I was in first year in college, I was still playing rugby competitively. I think I was 98 kilos. I was touching the 100 kilo scale anyway. I always remember that. I remember my heaviest was definitely high 90s, and rightly so as a prop forward. But when I went to college, I started to cook for myself. I started to just take care of myself a little bit better, and I lost an awful lot of weight for the better good, realistically. I was a real heavy teenager. I was always overweight, but that was kind of masked in, I always say, it's very, really funny. I was never told I was overweight. I was told I was good at rugby. And that's how it was banked, and it was kind of like, sure, he needs the weight. He's playing prop forward, or he's a hooker, or he's playing rugby inside, so no one ever came to me. It was like, look, you're probably, obese on the BMI scale, and you have, an awful lot of excess body fat. But it wasn't the case. It was actually the opposite. They were like, look, bigger is better. Keep packing it on. You're going to need it when you go to seniors.
What can we feed you?
So then when I went to college, and I started taking care of myself a little bit better, I lost 25 kilos in that year. Wow. So I went from being 98 kg competitive prop forward to, I think I was like mid 70s, maybe, around there. And I was just like, I was a quarter of this person I was when I went back. So I remember I went back, and they were like, what are we going to do with you? And then there was this awkward phase of, right, we'll put you in flanker, and then we'll put you in second center, and we'll put you winger. And then I was sub hooker for a while. And it was at that point then you're like, right, I have to make a call here, because I don't want to put back on weight. It's the best I ever felt. My confidence was, way better when your body image is better. I was getting attention from women. I was 17 years old in college, 18 years old in college. Everything was better about my life, bar the fact that the rugby dream was slipping away from me. So that was that point where I had to let go of that identity of, right, this rugby thing isn't for me. And I suppose what helped me bridge that was I just transitioned that energy into a different sport. So I started doing jiu-jitsu. I went into martial arts. I did jiu-jitsu for 5 years, and I suppose it'll be obvious when you hear the whole story, but I have this real obsessive tendencies. Anything I do, I go all in, and it becomes my whole life and identity. So it was pretty okay I came to terms that, right, rugby isn't that year transition where I was being bled out of the team was the realization for me. And you lose the enjoyment anyway. And then I just took that energy and put it elsewhere. And the caveat to that is, the reason I was losing weight was I was meal prepping for myself. And that ended up being my business. So I started a business based off that. I started Country Munch. I started selling dinners to fellas in college, everyone in college. And then I became known as the meal prep guy, and fast forward 7 years, and it's still working as a full-time job to this day, as own a meal prep company. So I suppose there was no hard feelings for me, because my sights just changed. I was like, right, I have an opportunity here to grow a business. I'm going to channel my health and fitness goals elsewhere into a sport that I suppose isn't required for me to be a high 90 kilo athlete. And those sites, kept changing over the years, but I always say, everything happens for a reason in that regard. I don't regret it in any way.
What got you into the food prep? Because I went to college with Eric back 15 years ago, and I remember one time he came home, was like,
I got a great deal of coconut noodles from the student union, and we had like bags and bags of them. And I was like, okay, not the healthiest thing in the world, but it was
But
something
they
to
were
get through the
free.
next.
They were free.
But something to get through to the next meal. And we both wish we knew a guy like you that would like the meal prep and stuff like that. Was
Yeah.
there a catalyst or a spark there that had you meal prepping the I
don't
suppose the
know.
right foods to help you lose 25 kilo? Because I
Yeah.
know I wasn't eating right in college.
Yeah, no, and nor was I. And prior to college, I wouldn't say I ate bad, but I was from a farm in West Limerick. I've 3 older brothers, and I would just eat loads. I wouldn't necessarily eat bad food. We didn't necessarily eat fantastic, but like I was just eating monster portions of everything. I remember my brothers would come home from school at different times, and I'd have a dinner with each of them. So my oldest brother, my oldest brother would come home
We
at
are
1.
so alike.
Yeah, I'd have a bit of dinner with him. Then the other brother would come up from study. I'd have dinner with him. And I'd have my own dinner at the evening time. So I was always eating. So then when you leave home and go to college, you have to fend for yourself. And I'm sure I went through that initial phase of coconut noodles and whatever it is. But I still think we were being pressed, with rugby and with sports to watch what we were eating. I remember I was really, really into the gym at that point. I suppose like when you get, it's like anything else, when you see a little bit of progress and you're like, Jesus, what I'm doing here is making significant changes to how I look, how I feel, how people see me. There's a whole caveat of benefits. And I just associated that with the food. I was like, right, there's a real easy correlation here. The better I eat, the better I look, the better I train, the better I feel. And it was as simple as YouTube, a bolognese recipe, a curry recipe, a stir fry, whatever it may be. And I just started to really enjoy it. There was no magic pill or there was nothing else. I just started to meal prep, and I enjoyed the process of cooking, and convenience was my thing. I was still training maybe twice a day. I was studying, and I am a qualified chemical and biochemical engineer. So that's what I was studying in college, chemical engineering. I never used it. I'm not a chemical engineer, but I have the degree. And it was a full-on course, like it was long hours. So I didn't have time to come and go and cooking meals and the last part of that was I was broke. I was a student. I wasn't working. I couldn't afford to eat out every day. I couldn't afford to be splurging on dinners or lunches in the canteen. So prepping my dinner the night before was the most logical option. And it just was fortunate at that time. Social media was just kind of coming of age, and there was a big kind of burst of health and fitness. And I really thought I was going to be the gym version of the health and fitness. I was doing all my training videos, my gym videos, my workouts, and they would get minor traction. And then I remember I did a breakfast recipe, and it got a big hit. And I was like, geez, there's probably something to this. But I was like, no. I was like, I want to be the gym person. I follow all these American vloggers and YouTubers. Like, I want to be the Irish version of that. So back to me squatting, back to me deadlifting, back to me benching. Here's my lunch. Another hit, another ping, way more views, way more interaction on the food stuff. So then I was like, right, there's something to this for sure. And I just leaned into the food a bit more, and the engagement was up, the interaction was up, because I think it was the one piece people weren't really getting at that time. There was an influx and a saturation of training videos and gym videos, but there was very little around the food people were eating, or like easy recipes or easy meals. So it started with me just making recipe videos and meal prepping for myself. And then a buddy of mine just asked would I prep him dinners. He was working shift work in a factory in Limerick, and he was trying to lose a little bit of weight. I said, not a hope, man. I was like, I'm up the walls here. He said, I'll give you a tenner a meal. I was like, all right, grand, yeah, 5 meals, 50 quid.
Sold.
So he gave me 50 quid. I gave him 5 dinners and accidentally started a meal prep service from there. And it just grew and grew and grew from there. So yeah, like I always say, there was no business plan. I had no idea what I was doing. I was enjoying it. I liked the cooking. It was a really easy sell because I was the best marketing it could be, because I was this, prior overweight person that had lost a lot of weight, was visually very obvious, and I made it obvious that it was true to food. So it was a real easy sell early days. It was like, here's how I lost weight, here's the dinners that I'm making. If you want to buy dinner, you can buy it. And it was like that, just via Snapchat and Instagram, really.
Tired, aching muscles, and overworked feet?
Discover Ultra Pure Ice Cold Menthol Gel, your instant, fast-acting and cooling savior.
Powered by menthol and boosted by arnica, rosemary, eucalyptus, and peppermint essential oils, it's a powerhouse of natural recovery.
Massage ultra pure ice cold menthol gel into your legs, arms, back, neck, shoulders, or our personal favorite,
Hey, easy, Sean.
feet, and feel the instant cooling sensation.
Grab a tube today. Your body will thank you.
Proudly made in County Mayo by an Irish-owned, award-winning family business, Ultra Pure blends quality, care, and value into every product.
Available in pharmacies and health stores nationwide or shop online. Find out more at ultrapurelabs.ie or on our new website, anygivenrunday.com. Now, let's get back to this podcast. You're a good cook as well, because if they were crap dinners, people would throw them at you.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that was the piece for me. Then I had to go away and actually learn how to cook. So, but I like that. I obviously had a knack for it. Like I always say, my mother was a great cook and my grandmother was a great cook. I wouldn't necessarily have said I was a good cook going into college, but I knew how to cook. And then like that, like we're so lucky now. Back then it was decent. You had YouTube. Now it's at our fingertips, recipes, ingredients, cooking videos are at the click of a button. So there's no excuse not to, I suppose, improve your skill set. But yeah, it came gradually to me, and I got good exposure from other travels around. I went to Italy for a while, and I worked in the kitchen there, and I just got more exposure to it. And you learn over time, and you just have to kind of back yourself and be like, right, I like the food, so it is what it is in that regard. And the feedback was good, and you're using feedback from there. So thankfully, yeah. Food wasn't rubbish from day one, thank God. It has gotten better. I can promise you that. We've a head chef now, and he's far better than I ever was. So it's dramatically better.
You have one of your things there. You talk about performance nutrition versus optimal nutrition. What do you mean when you're doing meal preps and stuff, or even for yourself and your training and stuff? What's the difference there? Because I know you talk about like losing weight and stuff like that, but then there's a difference between performance and optimal. Is it not good food versus bad food, or what we talking about when we say performance versus optimal?
So the best example I can give now, and I was only talking about last night, we did a big cycle and run yesterday, a big training block, and in that we're on the move for maybe 4 hours. In that 4 hours, I reckon I had maybe 250 grams of sugar intra-workout, so which is necessary, but it isn't optimal, not great for dental hygiene. Not great to consume that amount of sugar, but in the context of what we're doing, it's necessary. So I suppose I always come back to that. If you're looking for optimal health and nutrition, it looks very different to performance, I think, anyway, because even with performance nutrition, sometimes we're taking fiber out, sometimes we're reducing fat intake, sometimes we're dramatically increasing carb intake. Whereas optimal, I would have a far more balanced approach of, far more veg, far more micronutrients, a nice kind of well-balanced plate of a protein, a carb source, a fat source, and whatever suits your lifestyle in that regard. Whereas performance needs to be a little bit different to suit what performance you're doing. That's the only ever caveat I would use. And I tend to preference that because, if a gen pop person was watching my training stories, whatever it may be, and they see me consuming 10 gels on a training session, which is 220 grams of sugar, I would hate for them to go away and think, oh yeah, so look, if he's having 220 grams of sugar, I can probably go and have 220 grams of sugar tomorrow on my 5K walk or whatever it may be. So the context is different. And the context is super important in terms of your training and your optimal health nutrition. So that's I think it's really important. I think those lines are blurred an awful lot when it comes to nutrition and people, I suppose, quote unquote, influencing it.
Do you get a lot of questions then on that about when you're doing your food and stuff, about tracking and stuff and carbs and protein, and people are like, because they see you do the performance side of it as well as the food side of it, you have that great little blend of both. Is that something you get a lot of questions asked on your social media kind of thing?
Yeah, I suppose I'm lucky. I went about it backwards, where I was food first, fully food industry, and then I started. I always kept my kind of fitness and health stuff to the side because I didn't want to be. I remember early days, naively, I was like, I don't want to be the gym food guy. I don't want to be pigeonholed as the healthy chef on TV or whatever it is. I wanted, and I would purposely do desserts and purposely do different recipes that weren't health orientated. And I suppose just at the time, I had logic there somewhere. It was like, if I pigeonhole myself as the healthy chef, I'll only get gigs for healthy stuff, for
Right.
healthy events, whatever. And whereas a lot of the stuff, a lot of the events that we do, I don't do it as much anymore because I have now come around to just leaning into that because it is who I am regardless. But early days, if you're doing other events or working with different brands, if they're not a healthy brand, they won't really associate with you. So for me, it was a stance I took early on. I was like, look, I'm just going to be a general across the board chef, cook. I'll work with all the brands and I'll keep my healthy stuff and my health and fitness to the side. But that tended to drip back in and maybe I think over the last few years, I suppose I've come more comfortable of like, right, I'm just going to post whatever I want to post. I don't have to be as strict or detailed with it anymore. Probably because thankfully you get to a level where you don't need to be. In those early days, you're working hard to cultivate an audience and a community and a career in an area where you think is best. Whereas then when you kind of already now have cultivated it and got a community, you can kind of go back into what you know and what and people will see that. People like, not to have a long-winded answer around this, but like when I started to drip feed back into health and fitness stuff, my engagement went way back up. And there's a really awkward period there where people are following you just for recipes. And I was getting DMs of like, why you stop training so much and just do the food stuff.
It's mad people
start
think they
cooking.
have that authority to tell you what to do just because
Oh
the kids
yeah,
follow. Like that's
yeah. It's funny, especially like when you work in TV and stuff, your demographic is very different to what it might be now, where like it was an older demographic, primarily female, that would watch TV at 6 o'clock in the evening time, who probably majority don't have an interest in me running a marathon in the weekend or me doing interval training sessions during the week. So there was a period there like that. It's nearly an acceptance of, right, I'm going to just lean into what I enjoy to do. Number one, my creativity is much higher when I'm making content about stuff that I enjoy that is actually authentic to what I'm doing. And after a while, you see there was a dip in engagement and followers, and then it rises back up when you get your right audience. Then you start changing it, and the people that weren't following before now see them do fitness and they come in. And so, in a long-winded answer, I think what I have now is far more authentic to what I want to do, regardless, and it's finding a balance there amongst all that.
In relation to food and the relationship with food, I was chubby kid, skinny teen, very big during my college years because I didn't follow a meal prep plan, and I hung around with Sean and alcohol. But the relationship you have with food now, obviously driven by your business. But I always say to people when I lose the weight and I'm training or I'm in a training block and they're like, "Jeez, you're looking lean." I was like, "No, there is still a fat man in here." Like I think about food all the time. I want food all the time. How is your relationship with food, and are the cravings or the wants kind of tailored now because it is who you are? It's this new identity. It's all eyes are on what I'm doing. Does the pressure kind of help stay on the straight and narrow, or is there a need to be on the straight and narrow? Is this just your everyday now? Because I need the straight and narrow.
Yeah, no, I've been doing it long enough where how I eat now is, if there was no camera on me, I wouldn't change a thing. And I'm lucky in that, I can still just create recipe videos, a broad range of them, and put them out for people to use, but it doesn't necessarily have to be what I eat every day. So like I'll often say that the biggest surprise people would have is a question I get at is like, geez, you must eat beautiful food every day because you're a chef. And I eat, I could eat everything and anything. I live off bagels and sandwiches and turkey burgers and wraps. So it's rare that I sit down and make a curry from scratch. Whereas I'll make a recipe video of a curry and put it out there, So like my job and my eating habits are very different. I love to cook for other people, Like that's my caveat there is if I'm cooking for M or cooking for the lads or for an event, I love cooking and I'll do a real nice high quality food. But for myself, it's bottom of the barrel stuff. It's convenience and it's whatever's there at the time that fuels me and keeps me going. But my relationship with food is very good. It wouldn't have been years ago. After rugby, I pivoted into bodybuilding for a while. And especially when you have obsessive tendencies, which I do, food is such an easy thing to obsess over. And I did for years. And unfortunately, when it's such a high reward system where restriction equals weight loss, which equals aesthetic appearance, which equals attention, there's a real vicious circle there where I just wasn't mature enough at the time. I was 21, 22, and it was that chain link of I restrict, I look better, I get more attention. This is really simple maths for me. And it was just consistent restriction. And, within restriction, then you get really bad food habits, you get really bad associations with food, you get disordered eating. So there was a period there where, I was full on. I won't say I had an eating disorder, but I had disordered eating for sure. I was super strict on food. I would have anxiety over going out for meals or family gatherings, especially in that period of bodybuilding, I use in quotation marks, or just, an intense cutting phase. I tracked everything, every calorie was accounted for. Yeah, it was a real negative association and outlook with food, and it's a pity. And I see it; it's still so common. And I suppose half my job is to try and averse people with that kind of stuff. And I came out of that fine and got into jiu-jitsu, and it was great, but there's still a weight cutting element. So when I was competing in jiu-jitsu, you make weight. You always have to make weight. And I was middleweight, so I was cutting down to 74 kilos, maybe 75 kilos. And I would have always naturally sat around 80. So training's great, but then there's maybe a 6-week period where you need to start cutting weight. And it came so easy to me. I would slip right back into those tendencies. And it was the exact same reward system where restriction equals weight loss, which equals your fight weight, and you can fight then. But the pros did not weigh the cons for me in that regard. You slip back into old habits, you become so super obsessive. And it's tough for people around you. It's tough, for Emma, for us to go for dinner and, I can't eat, or I have to have a salad, or I have to have a small starter because I don't have the calories. And you can get really, really good at justifying these things to yourself. They're like, no, sure, I'm competing next month. I'm competing at the Euros. This is part of the sport. It is what it is. And absolutely, there is a time and place for that if you're a competitive athlete. But there has to be a bit of give and take. And there probably needs to be more support structures around it, pre and post restriction, to make sure you come out of that restriction phase and back to a healthy body weight. And when you're in that, there's certainly a way of doing it. But unfortunately, the support systems aren't really there, or the knowledge is only getting there now, where people, usually it's a case of, 3 weeks out, I'll pull carbs, no carbs, and I'll drop weight fast. But your performance is brutal, your mood is brutal, your hormones are brutal, and it's a super negative effect on your body and coming out of that. So, I maybe left jiu-jitsu maybe 3 years ago, and it wasn't for that reason. It was because I got so infatuated by endurance sports, because food is your best friend in this sport, and I say this, with a pinch of salt, because there is the counter side of that then, where I see people going to endurance sports because it's the opposite. You can eat whatever you want, and it's nearly justified binging when you're training for a marathon and you come home and be like, I can eat whatever I want. I've ran 20K today. I've burnt X amount of calories. I can get my pizza, I can get Domino's, I can get my milkshake, which isn't the right practice either. So there's a real balancing act, and there has to be real intention around your food. In a positive light, you don't want it to be obsessive, but food is so important and nutrition is so important, but it can't be the only thing you think about when you're training. So there's always a fine line, and it's not food, it's the person. Like for me or for anyone else, to have those tendencies, you always have to check yourself and be like, right, am I eating because I want to eat, Or am I restricting because I feel like I need to? Or am I overeating here because I feel like I need to? So it's, for me, it came with age. I got better with it over time, over experience, and over better knowledge of what a good relationship with food looks like, what nourishment looks like for me. I think that took me a long time to figure out. And I suppose my job now, if I can help someone figure that out faster, good.
I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but one of your final weeks of your vlogging towards Dublin Marathon, it could have been the final week. You talked about this one really hit home. You talked about weight and stuff leading into it, and you probably lost. I could be wrong, like 2 to 3 kilo of muscle and stuff. That like
Yeah.
when someone's really training for something before you did ultra running. So like when you're doing jiu-jitsu or especially bodybuilding. It's about packing on muscle. Going the opposite way, you're putting all this energy and stuff into running, and the goal to get a good marathon time. Sometimes the aesthetics are not as good. Your muscles drop, your body fat percentage has gone up. I know for me, I tell people all the time when doing marathon training is when my body fat's probably at the worst throughout the year is when I'm peaking for the Dublin Marathon. Mentally, then, how did that impact you at all? Or are you just like, marathon's the goal now? I'm kind of over that.
Yeah, you just have to make peace with it. Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing, like, where initially I was just trying to preserve muscle mass, only purely for the aesthetic reason. You're still doing plenty of strength and conditioning work, but it looks very different when you're running or cycling or swimming or whatever your sport is. Your gym work is super different to if you're trying to be a bodybuilder or a powerlifter. There's no heavy sets, there's no hypertrophy. A lot of it is isometric work or strength and conditioning on your hips and glutes, which I never would have trained before. When I was gymming back then, it was how much can I bench, how much can I squat, how much can I pull off the ground. So when you're getting deep into when your mileage is getting higher and higher, number one, you don't have the energy to give to the gym work. You're nearly conscious of, I don't want to overdo it in the gym because I don't want DOMs on my hamstrings because I have a big run to do tomorrow or something like that. So yeah, it's something that I just probably made peace with to a degree. Like I didn't completely change my physique, but I certainly didn't put on any more muscle. Probably lost a little bit of size, but no, like I was pretty comfortable in, this is my goal. I want to, run the marathon. It was my first marathon last year. It's like, I want to run the marathon. I want to do a good time. So whatever it takes for that, I'm fine with. If it means losing a little bit of weight, if it means losing a little bit of muscle mass, so be it. That's the piece there where, do you want optimal performance or do you want aesthetics? Because if you ask any runner or any endurance athlete, it's performance. They don't give a rat's how they look. Lighter is better usually for them. So yeah, I'm sure it took a little bit of time at the start, but no, nowadays, I don't mind. Like I still don't think I look too bad, which is good, and I can bounce that off my girlfriend, and I'll know real quick then. I'll know real quick if she's like, these arms are gotten a bit smaller. Like, right, we're training arms tomorrow.
My better half says to me straight away, just to annoy me. Yeah, the arm's getting a bit small. Like, right, bicep curls and chin ups. It is.
Yeah.
We had in one of our very early episodes, we had a guy, Conor Jemison, on. He says you can't look like a show pony and train like a racehorse.
Yeah.
You can either have one or the other, and you have to decide early what it's going to be and just make your peace with it. And it's still something, we're 5 years into this podcast now, still something I think even still when I'm like, oh, I could probably save a few calories here or there. And it's like, no, fuel the jet. Like you have to make sure you're performing well. And then like that endurance athletes, well, except for High Rocks now. I think High Rocks is probably, we'll get on to what you're doing next, probably one where they like to look good and perform good.
That's like t-shirt offer.
There is, yeah. Listen, if I was running marathons with no t-shirt on, I'd have a lot more work in the gym as well. No, look, of course there's a balance, and the main thing here is, what do you want out of it? Because if the person still holds some bit of their emphasis on how they look, then absolutely they should lean into the aesthetics more. But it's come to terms of ground. You're not going to get the absolute most out of your runs then, or your training, because you can't be in a deficit really for a long period of time if you want to be in endurance. If you want to be fueling your runs or recovering from your long cycles, you just can't afford to be in deficit. You'll crash and burn very quickly. So it's coming to peace where do you get most enjoyment from? And I know I get far more from racing than I do from the aesthetics. The aesthetics is a personal thing. And I think everyone has a period where that's all, that's what it is. But I think usually they kind of come out of that. You see, it's so, and High Rocks has helped that for sure. It has gotten people outrunning people. Like when I started running 3 years ago, maybe, which is relatively new to it, park run wasn't a massive thing. Whereas now park runs around here are packed. It's brilliant. Like, and there's every walk of life is running. And it is a trend, if you look at social media now, every second person is running, and it's the thing to do. And it'll probably leave in a couple of years' time and something else will come along. But these aren't negative things. These are all positive impacts on society. I think anyway. Listen, if it's getting people out the door and exercising, brilliant. But it's just that piece of where do you want to put your energy, and that's a personal decision people need to make.
Can I touch on your running career and move away slightly from food, more into your personal side? Having been so competitive in two sports now, we've looked at your younger years with a broad stroke, but rugby being the priority. Then it's into jiu-jitsu. Obviously, you mentioned competing in Euros. Into running. How humbled, or I suppose you said you took on your first half marathon and then your first marathon. The runner's high we talk about. That's ultimately what I'm getting at. How did the training versus the accomplishment feel for you in terms of your sporting career to date?
It was the first time in years that I was doing a sport that I was not good at. And I loved that, because you see such huge incremental progress after every training block. Like at a certain point in rugby, your role, and you're not getting incrementally better every year. You're getting percentages. You might become a better scrummager, or your line-out throw is your accuracy is getting better, or your carries, or whatever it is. And in jiu-jitsu, you're honing that skill, but it's marginal gains. Whereas, it's so amazing to start the sport and be bad at it. And I'd be really careful with that now, because running is subjective. I would never say I was a bad runner, because anyone who runs is running. There is no good and bad. I think that's really important. But, what I'll say is it was really hard for me. That's the better way of saying this. When I started running, it was just like laborsome. 5K was an absolute effort. And I had no structure. I had no knowledge of running. I was just laced the shoes up. They were a pair of Nike Flyknits. Couldn't have been worse running shoes. I may as well have been running bare feet. And I would just go for a run around the block, hard as I could, 100%. Come back in, feel great, like get that runner's high, and then 2 days later we'll go again, 5K, all out, let's go, Flyknits on. And it was just like, it was madness really. I was just running balls to the wall every second day. But what I took away then, so Grant, you do your first half marathon, I think I did it in 2 hours, and then you book another one next year later, you do it in an hour 40 something. Like, geez, I've made 15 minutes of progress here, and you're getting better and you're getting more efficient, and you're learning about training splits and training structures. So what I'm getting at here is it was the first time where I was able to be a complete novice at a sport and give it time and energy, which I'm more than happy to do, and give it a bit of obsessiveness, and then see real, good progress. And unfortunately, that lessens the more you do it then, whereas now it's unlikely that I'd ever get a 15-20 minute PB of shorter race stuff. Longer race stuff, absolutely you could. But the marginal gain gets smaller and smaller and smaller the more efficient you get. But like then I transitioned into triathlon, and cycling now is a sport that I thought I was decent at, but no, I'm not a good cyclist. It's going to take me another year of work to be where I need to be. But I see that as such a privilege. A lot of people would be despondent of, I'm so far off the mark here. It's because and again, I would train with people who are much better than me. So I'm always the weak link, but it's brilliant, because when I come home, then I'm like, right, I have so much room to grow into this. It would be awful to take up a sport tomorrow and learn that you can only improve by a minute or two, because then it's super hard to motivate yourself. Whereas when you surround yourself with people who are phenomenal cyclists and phenomenal runners, you see the potential. Like, right, this is great. I know, and especially endurance, what you put in, you typically get out. It isn't the case with rugby. You know, you might not get picked. There could be politics there. You could get injured, and you could in running too, for sure. Jiu-jitsu, you might just get caught on a day. The fella you're competing against could just be better than you, and that's just the way it is. But with running, if the more you run, typically the better you get. Like, I'll put a parentheses there, and there has to be some structure on it. But generally, the more energy you give it, the more you get out of it. So, you know, how lucky are we to have a thing where you can put energy into and get it back?
Right before you started your vlogging last year for the Dublin Marathon, you did a triathlon up the creek last June.
Actually, I think it was this weekend last year. I'm fairly certain. Or last weekend.
With that going on now, where we triathlon going on this weekend as we record start of the year, a lot of people doing that. Am I right in saying it seemed on your post you were hinting at this that you were already thinking what you're going to do in a couple of weeks' time, the Ironman? Was that seed sown there that it could be for a lot of people, or was that something that was always on track? You wanted to say the triathlon first, or how did that have any influence at all on you starting to go, right, I want to take an Ironman off the list?
I actually did. I did a sprint triathlon, I think 9 years ago. It was one of the first things that I ever did. Way before, it was probably still mid rugby era. I actually always loved triathlon. I always taught myself, you know, or I suppose I knew a time would come where I was going to give that another lash. I did it when I was in my teens, and I loved it. I swam when I was younger, pre-rugby, and I was a decent swimmer, and I was a lifeguard as well. So I knew swimming was something that, like, the biggest barrier to entry with triathlon is swimming, because you can kind of, the more you cycle, the better you get, the more you run, the better you get. Swimming isn't really like that. It's very technical. The more you swim, you don't necessarily get better. You have to learn the technique and drill the techniques. But I knew I kind of had that, a base for it anyway, at least. So then, I did up the creek this time last year, and I loved it. And like that, on the day, you know, you're below par and what you think you should be. And triathlon is so great because, you know, I was probably the youngest by a mile there. It's even the club inside now, it's people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And it's just amazing. You know, these people that might have 20 years on you, that are smoking you on cycles and on runs and in the pool. You know, so it's, in that regard, it's brilliant. Like, whereas other sports, I'm 28, but if I was playing team sport now, I'm on the way out. Like, you know, during COVID, I went back playing football for 2 seasons, and I was one of the older people on the team. You know, there's young lads, 18, 19, coming up who are fitter, faster, stronger. Whereas triathlon is a sport where there's no rules, there's no guidelines, there's no age limits. There's age categories for sure. So yeah, it was always in my peripherals. And there's a bit of a barrier to entry. It's an expensive sport to get into. It's
that was my follow-up.
Yeah, it's expensive. There's a lot of, you have to buy the bike, you have to get all the gear. It's a huge time commitment. You know, like, my training hours have tripled, I'd say, since from in the lead up for Dublin Marathon, I ran 4 days a week. Whereas in the lead up to the half Ironman, I'm doing 12 sessions a week. You know, so your volume is through the roof, but it's strategic in that regard. But so you need the time, you need ironically, you need the money to be able to pay for all the gear and pay for the entries to the races. No, that's not essential. Absolutely, triathlon can be done on a budget for sure, but there are more barriers to entry for triathlon than there are running. Running, a pair of shoes and out you go. The road is free, whereas, you know, triathlon isn't always that. But yeah, I don't know why, but it has always been in my peripherals. I think I remember thinking when I was younger, there is no way I could ever do an Ironman. I also remember the first time I ever went running, I thought there is no way I could ever run a half marathon, because I remember I ran a kilometer and I was gassed, and I was like, how in the name of Christ do people run 21 of these? And I remember running my first half marathon and thinking, I'll never in my life be able to run a marathon. There is no chance I could run this half marathon twice. And then, like, it's the most addictive thing in the world. Then you start running more and, like, Jesus, I reckon I could do this. And that's what you want. You want something that's so elusive And that's my thing of like, unfortunately, it's like, what's next? What's bigger? So in 3 weeks it's the half Ironman. What next after that will be the full Ironman. For sure. I've not booked, but I would put a lot of money on it now that in 6 weeks' time, when I'm 3 weeks finish this race, I'll be booking something for next year, and it'll be a full, and that's the beauty of it. You can keep growing, and as a person, as an athlete, you just progressively keep getting better and better if you give it the time, give it the energy.
Obviously, you spent a lot of time in teams and surrounded by teams. It's quite different to then go individual to jiu-jitsu. So you need a lot of resilience, a lot of kind of discipline, I suppose, to keep yourself performing and being involved with club. When you went running, obviously it was on your own around the block, but now with triathlon, we're getting involved with clubs, and you've alluded to good cyclists, good runners. If you can see, you can be, as long as you don't compare. Because comparison is always the thief of joy, but as long as you can see it, how important now is being a part of a club or getting back into that team-like mentality of being surrounded by people, although on race day being an individual? How important is a club to you now?
Yeah, it's perfect in that regard because you get the best of both worlds, because it is an individual sport. You are only competing against yourself. Now anyway. Of course, if you're racing properly, you're looking for podium spots and whatnot. But across the board, 99% of triathletes, it is just an individual thing. You're competing against your mind, whatever demons you have, or previous times you have ran in that distance. But you get the benefit of group training. So like I left team sports when I stopped playing rugby, and I was kind of, weirdly enough, I was kind of thankful in a way where I liked the idea of what I put in solo. I suppose the best way of saying this is I knew I was hyper disciplined, and I can be disciplined in anything. And it's great to be rewarded individually for your own discipline, because in team sports, that's just not the case. You can have the best game of your life, but if the team isn't going well, you're not winning matches. And that can be a frustrating thing where you're given 110%. And you see it the whole time in teams where there's a group of lads that are all in, and then there's a group of lads that are drinking the night before. And that just doesn't work in a team element. I'm not saying that was the case when I was playing rugby, but it's something that you would see an awful lot in team sports. So for me, it was kind of like, I know I'm well able to give 100% of my time and energy. And I'd love to see what I could do if I'm the only person that gets, the benefits of that. And I directly see the benefit of that. So jiu-jitsu was that, you give energy to it and you get it back. And running is the same, and triathlon is the same. But you have the caveat then of having like-minded, high-performing people around you that probably bring you on an extra few percentage. Because, everyone knows this. If you're only running by yourself, you put limits on where you are. So I know this is probably my capacity, X minutes per kilometer. Whereas I remember I went running with a friend who is a runner maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. He'd be a much better runner than I was. And even I was like sick nervous going into the session, but ended up being well able to run with him. And I was way above what I thought I could run. I was working a lot harder than he was, I can guarantee that. But it opens up the spectrum of, right, I'm actually, I was limiting myself there for sure. Or, if you're doing a group cycle, you put limits on yourself of, Jesus, I don't think I'd be able to do over 100K. And then you do 130 and you're fine. Like, oh yeah, no, I just needed a bit of support around me. I needed the morale. I needed the naivety, for someone just to lead and for you to follow for a while, and then do it enough, you start leading, and then there'll be people behind you who don't think they can do it, and you take that role in a group or in a team. So it's the best of both worlds, and I say it to I have loads of friends out that have started running, and they run mostly solo, but I would always try and encourage them, find someone that's a bit better than you, or find a group or a track session, and fall in with them, because they will push you on an extra few percent that you don't know you have until you're forced to find it. And it's hard to convince yourself to find it if you're alone. If you're running hard and you're working hard, you're not going to look for the extra few percentage. Whereas if you're running with a buddy and he's starting to pull away from you, you'll find it. You absolutely will. You'll find the extra few percentage, or you'll break the glass ceiling. And then once it's broken, you're doomed, because there's no limits then,
Oh, just with training with people, you're an entrepreneur,
I look on your Instagram, it seems like you do a lot of travel. One, how are you finding structuring the time? And two, I'm assuming, do you eat a lot on the road then, as
Yeah.
well? And what kind of tips would you give someone who's trying to fit in, as you're doing now, 14 hours of training weekly into a half Ironman? I mean, that means, you need a lot of fuel to keep that engine going. And you've said before, one of your videos, your reels, that like food to you is almost the most important part. So how are
Yeah.
you finding eating on the road, and how are you prioritize your time for all this?
Yeah, like it's just structure and a lick of discipline, routine is great, and as that famous saying goes, like motivation is brilliant, but it won't always be there. Motivation won't necessarily get you out of bed every morning of the week. It's consistency. I'll always say that I was never the best at any of the sports, and even with business, our business wasn't amazing when we started, but I was just always consistent. We always showed up, and you just tend to get better and better over time. Then it's undeniable to a degree. So training is like that. If you're consistent with it, and you have to be very much proactive. You can't, especially with a higher training volume, you can't be reactive to training. You can't say, "Heck it, I'll go for a run tonight, and we'll see what way we are tomorrow." And I might run tomorrow morning. If it's not, for me personally, I have to block the structure of the week. So like, right, I'm running Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm cycling Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I'll swim 2 mornings. And that's it now. That's in stone. That's the first thing that goes into the calendar. And then the time of that needs to be changed. So granted, I need to be in the kitchen for 9, so we're running or we're swimming at 7. I'll have an hour there. And the first few weeks I was doing it, I thought it was lunacy. I was like, there's no way I'll be able to keep this up. But over time, you get so used to the routine and consistency. Now I've been doing it for whatever this block has been, for probably 16 weeks since Christmas.
I love the on your vlogs you did. You had every week was the whiteboard. You could see
uh,
Monday was this, Tuesday was that. And it was just so
most
simple, but it was just like ticked off, scratched off every time you did it.
Yeah, and that's probably the best investment I ever made, with a small little whiteboard for my room. And it's twofold, obviously. Number one, you set the intention for the day. First thing I see in the morning is that whiteboard. So I see, perfect, run and swim, or cycle and swim, or whatever it is. And then number two, you have the satisfaction of crossing it off. So every week I look at that board, and every session is crossed off. So you're reaffirming the training. It's every week you tick the box, you scratch it off, you clean that board tonight, and then Monday morning again, it's a full board, it's a full week, and you work to cross it off. So it makes it far more manageable. It's super overwhelming to look at a week if it's not written down and be like, Jesus Christ, I need to fit in 9 sessions. Where am I going to get time? Whereas if you put it on paper and you break it down and bring it daily, it's far more manageable. And then the second part of that is the food is the training is obviously super important, but if you're not eating, you won't be able to train that much regardless. So the food and the fuel is as they say, it's 70-80% of the work. It's so important. Once you start training fueled, you'd never train fasted again. It's just, there's no comparison, and you won't get away with it. A lot of injuries and a lot of niggles come from under fueling, underperforming, overreaching, under recovery, and that all comes back to your food. So as intentional as you have to be with training, you have to be intentional with your food. If performance is your goal, and we come back to that performance versus optimal. If it's optimal nutrition you want, you don't really need to be as intentional. You need a good shopping list. You need to have your fridge filled with food, but you can eat intuitively for sure once you know what a good plate looks like for optimal nutrition. You're getting a good source of protein every meal. You're getting your micronutrients. You're drinking plenty of water. You're enjoying your food. You're not restricting. You're able to have social occasions and have a few drinks. That's optimal for me. That's brilliant. But performance is a little bit more fine-tuned. It's right. I have an early morning session, so tonight I need to do a carb load. I know I'm doing a double threshold day on a Tuesday, so I know I have to get a good block of food in between the morning and evening session. I have to moderate my caffeine. I have to get way more sodium into if it's going to be a warm day and we're cycling, it's going to be 4 hours on the bike. So there's just fine-tuning nutrition in the performance world, and you get, it sounds so overwhelming, but it's small tweaks and small intentional choices that you reap towards so much in training. It's the biggest performance enhancing thing you can do is good sleep, good recovery, and good food.
Now that we're just back touching on the food elements, and you've given us so much information already, having information is one thing. We have information in our pockets, we have information everywhere. Knowing what to do and how to use the information, I suppose, is the most difficult part. For somebody listening to this, Owen, and they want to engage in your content, they like what you're saying, they want to follow your way in terms of how they eat, how they prep, the meal plans, how can they get involved and best use the information or the services that you are providing?
Yeah, look, I mean, following the page and using recipes is brilliant. The best thing that people can do is trial and error themselves. Like, nutrition is such a funny one where the science is there and the logic is there, but it might not work for everyone. Across the board, there's some real basic stuff that work great, like your carb load and your post-workout and pre-workout foods in terms of what carb sources to use. That's kind of standardized and that will work, but quantity and food group and timing is all individualized. Like, I know loads of people that eat different foods, different times, and that's what fuels them best and they perform the best at that. So, the first thing is get the info from the right people for sure. There's an overload of information out there. There's a million me's online that are selling the same story. So, our job is who sells the story the best and who's the most authentic and unfortunately who's not selling something. Because, realistically, I'm not selling a product. Country Munch is a great meal prep service if you're in Limerick, but if you're watching my stories in Dublin or Galway or Cork, you can't eat our food. So I can only just give you the info that will hopefully help you perform better. And that's all I really want. I'm not looking for anything else from that. If I can help, great. But the best thing is to get the info that works for you and then trial it and try it and see how it works and see how it feels and make the tweaks and make the changes. And like in your training and early days in training is the best place to do that. It's not race day. It's not 3 weeks off from a race. We don't start just incorporating a new supplement because I said so the day before a race. It's taking your time to find what works for you, and trial and error is the best way of doing that. But yeah, look, I suppose if it's food and recipes and day-to-day stuff, Instagram or TikTok would be the best place for my own personal stuff. Anyway, if I can help.
It's been great, Owen, watching your journey, and I was looking at all your recipes this morning. I had to keep going through them fast. I was getting starving and more hungrier in each one. I was like, I've got notes to write down. It's been great listening to you for the past hour of the podcast. I do want to wrap up just one question. Going back to your vlogs and stuff for Dublin Marathon, and you did phenomenal in that, by the way, we did the final race. Is there something you learned throughout those 20 weeks that you wish you could have told yourself on week one about that journey?
That's a good question. Is there something I would have done? No, what I will say, I suppose the thing I would tell people now, I have friends going into big marathon blocks now, 16, 20-week blocks, is to try and enjoy it as much as you can when you're in it, because it goes really quick and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and the weeks tend, especially when you're knocking them off a whiteboard and cleaning again, the weeks fly. And I think I was so infatuated with the end race, you miss a lot of the training in between, and a lot of it is tick the box stuff. And there's a time and place for that. But the big thing is that I would say for the easy runs, take them easy. I'd even take the watch off and run without the watch for your easy runs, and keep the communal element if it's there already. Use your parkrun or if you're running with your buddies as a social thing. Every session doesn't need to be do or die intentional. So I suppose there's nothing I would change. I think I did a really good block and I was really happy with it, and I had no regrets with it. But I suppose the more training blocks you do, the easier they get, and the more I'm watching friends and stuff go into them, it's the more I'm telling them just to don't let the weeks fly by. Enjoy the sessions, be present in them. The privilege is the training block. The race is just you reap the rewards of the work you've put in. That's all it is, because the work has to be done by then. So the enjoyment needs to be in those 20 weeks. Because if you're not, then we're doing something wrong. It can't be a slog for 20 weeks. So it's find the enjoyment and be present in those runs and make the most of those blocks. And then when come race day, you're reaping the rewards and reaping the work that you've put in over the last few weeks.
Just to piggyback off that, you had a great way of breaking down your long runs. You did a couple of K yourself, then you ran with someone, and you finished with the park run, then doing that 5K and getting that more of a maximum effort there. I just thought that was a great way of someone that's doing their marathon for the first time and just looking at 3 different 5Ks instead of going for a 15K or 20K, whatever it is, breaking it down like that. Owen, it's been fantastic listening to you for the last hour on the podcast, and very best of luck with the Netherlands and your half Ironman coming up.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And that is it for this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. Myself, Owen, and Eric. Take care.